I'm 65 years old, and I need to tell you something most people never hear until it's too late. If you think prison is where your life ends, you're wrong for me. Prison is where my life finally started making sense. But the cost of that understanding was 40 years I can never get back. I didn't wake up one day and think, I'm going to ruin my life. Nobody does. It happens quietly. One small choice, one excuse. One moment where you tell yourself, I'll fix it later. That word, later. It followed me into a concrete cell with steel bars and a number instead of a name. When the door first closed behind me, I thought the worst part would be the fear, the violence, the noise, the loss of freedom. But none of that compares to what happens when the lights go out at night and you're alone with your thoughts. That's when prison really starts. At first, I counted days, then weeks, then years. Eventually, I stopped counting at all. Because counting hurts. You start replaying your life like a broken tape. Every conversation you rushed through, every warning you ignored, every moment you chose comfort over truth. I used to believe prison was about punishment. I was wrong. Prison is about reflection whether you want it or not. I watched men twice, my size, cry in silence, not because they were weak, but because time had finally cornered them. You see, in the outside world, time feels unlimited. You tell yourself, I'll change when things calm down. I'll be better when I have more money. I'll slow down after this phase. Inside prison, there is no after. The walls don't move. The days don't care. And excuses expire fast. I remember a man named Carl, 70 years old, walked with a limp, hands always shaking. One night, he sat next to me and said something I'll never forget. I thought I had time. That was it. No speech, no drama. Just 5 words that carried an entire lifetime of regret. Carl wasn't a monster. He wasn't evil. He was ordinary. And that's what terrified me. Because ordinary mistakes are the most dangerous ones. They don't feel dangerous when you make them. They feel reasonable. I made my biggest mistakes while feeling completely justified. I told myself I was doing what I had to do. That pressure made me act this way, that everyone else would do the same. That lie sounded comforting, until I had 40 years to sit with it. Here's something nobody tells you about regret. It doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It shows up when you hear laughter in the distance and realize it's not meant for you. When you see sunlight through a small window and remember mornings you wasted. When you get a letter from someone who stopped waiting. I missed. Funerals, birthdays. Phases changed without me noticing. Time didn't stop because I did. And that's when it hit me. Prison didn't steal my life. My thinking did. Every man I met inside believed the same thing at some point. I'm different. This won't end badly for me. I'll figure it out. Confidence can be a beautiful thing. But blind confidence is a slow poison. I learned that wisdom doesn't come from age. It comes from consequences. And consequences don't care how smart you think you are. There was a moment about 15 years in, when I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't afraid of dying in prison. I was afraid of dying, unaware, afraid of never understanding what actually mattered. Outside, I chased respect. Inside, I learned respect doesn't mean anything if it costs your peace. Outside, I chased control. Inside, I learned the only real control is over how you respond. Outside, I thought strength meant dominance. Inside, I learned strength is restraint. But this understanding didn't come gently. It came through watching men destroy themselves with anger, through seeing hope fade from eyes that once believed tomorrow was guaranteed. The worst prisoners weren't the violent ones. They were the ones still pretending nothing was wrong. Denial is comfortable until it becomes permanent. I started paying attention, not just to others, but to myself. I asked questions I had avoided my entire life. Why was I always in a hurry? Why did I need to prove myself so badly? Why did silence make me uncomfortable? The answers weren't flattering. I realized I had been running from stillness, from responsibility, from myself. Prison forced me to stop running. And when you stop running, you finally see what's been chasing you. Fear, insecurity, ego, things I thought I controlled, were actually controlling me. Here's the part that's hard to hear. Most people never hit a prison cell, but they still live in cages. Cages made of routines they hate. Cages made of expectations they never chose. Cages made of fear disguised as stability. The bars just look nicer. I see it now when I watch people talk about success. They're exhausted, disconnected, always waiting for a future moment to feel alive. That future moment rarely comes. In prison, I met men who had everything once: money, families, status. And in the end, none of that visited them. Only memories did. And memories are cruel when they're unfinished. One night, lying on my bunk, I asked myself a question that changed my direction. If I ever get out, what kind of man do I want to be before the world decides for me? That question scared me more than any sentence ever did, because it meant responsibility. No more blaming, no more excuses. Just truth. I started living differently even inside those walls, listening more, speaking less, choosing peace over pride. It didn't make my sentence shorter, but it made my mind freer. And that's when I realized something terrifying and hopeful at the same time. Most people wait for a disaster to wake up. A prison sentence, a heart attack, a loss they can't undo. But the lesson is available before the pain. You don't need bars to feel trapped, and you don't need freedom to be awake. The question is, are you willing to listen before life forces you to? Because the next lesson prison taught me is the one almost nobody escapes from. In time, I used to think the hardest part of prison was losing freedom. I was wrong. The hardest part is realizing how little freedom you ever had to begin with. Inside those walls, there's a strange moment that happens to almost everyone. It doesn't happen on day one. It doesn't even happen in the first year. It happens when hope gets quiet. Not gone, just quiet. That's when the real learning begins. You stop asking, when will I get out? And start asking, who was I before I came in? That question is dangerous, because once you ask it honestly, you can't unsee the answer. I saw it in myself one night, sitting on a cold metal bunk, staring at a ceiling I had memorized inch by inch. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't misunderstood. I wasn't betrayed by the system. I was predictable. Every bad choice I made had a warning sign. Before it, I just ignored it because it slowed me down. Outside, speed is praised. Move fast. Decide fast. Win fast. Inside prison, speed disappears, and when it does, you finally see how rushed your life really was. I used to mistake urgency for importance. If something felt urgent, I assumed it mattered. Most of it didn't. Emails, arguments, deadlines, ego battles that felt huge at the time and meaningless later. In prison, urgency dies. And what's left is truth. I watched men lose their minds over tiny things. A missing tray, a disrespectful look, a rumor. Not because those things mattered, but because anger gave them something to feel. When you lose control over your life, you cling to control over emotions, even the destructive ones. I did that too. For years, I stayed angry. at the system, at people who moved on without me, at myself. Even though I wouldn't admit it, anger felt powerful. But power without direction is just noise. One afternoon, an older man been inside longer than me said something that cut through everything. Anger makes the days feel shorter. That's why men hold on to it. I didn't understand at first, then I did. When you're angry, time feels fast. When you're calm, time feels long. And prison teaches you this cruel trick. If you're calm, you feel every second. So men choose anger, they choose distraction, they choose chaos. Anything to avoid feeling time. But I got tired of running from it. I started doing the one thing most men inside avoid. I sat still. No radio, no conversation, no pretending. Just me and my thoughts. That's when the patterns appeared. I saw how often I chose being right over being kind. How often I spoke to win instead of understand. How often I avoided discomfort by making excuses. Prison didn't create those habits. It exposed them. Asterisk. Here's the truth nobody likes to hear. Your environment doesn't define you. It reveals you. Pressure doesn't change who you are. It shows who you've been all along. And when I looked honestly, I didn't like what I saw. I had spent my life reacting instead of choosing, letting emotions decide my actions, letting pride decide my direction. I thought I was in control. IWAS and single quotes T. Control was the illusion that got me here. There was a man I shared a cell block with, smart, calm, never raised his voice. One day I asked him how he stayed so steady. He said, "I stopped letting moments vote on my future." That sentence followed me for years. Outside, every moment gets a vote. A bad day justifies bad decisions. A good day feeds arrogance. Inside, you learn that moments pass, but consequences stay. I began to slow everything down before speaking. I waited before reacting. I questioned myself, not because I had to, but because I finally understood the cost of not doing it. Time in prison teaches you something brutal about habits. They don't disappear when life changes. They follow you. Men came in swearing they'd change. Same mouth, same promises. 6 months later, same behavior. Not because change is impossible, but because it's uncomfortable. Change feels like weakness before it feels like strength, and most people can't tolerate that phase. I learned that discipline isn't about force. It's about structure. The structure you build when nobody is watching. I build routines. Not to pass time, but to respect it. Reading, writing, thinking. Simple. Things hard to maintain. And slowly, something shifted. I stopped feeling like time was attacking me. It became something I could use. That's when the second lesson hit me. Most people don't waste time. They trade it for comfort, for approval, for distraction, and they call it living. In prison, distractions are limited. So you see clearly how addicted you were to noise. Noise keeps you from hearing the questions that matter. Questions like, why am I chasing this? Who am I trying to impress? What am I avoiding by staying busy? Those questions don't leave you alone. When the lights go out, I realized I had spent decades preparing for a future version of myself that never arrived. The successful version, the calm version, the one-day version. One day became never. And prison showed me something else. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your habits. Every man who fell hard inside had the same story. They thought one decision wouldn't matter. Just this once. Just this time. Life is built on just this once. I don't blame my younger self anymore. I understand. Him. He wanted comfort. He wanted certainty. He wanted to feel important. Those wants aren't evil. But when you let them drive, they take you places you never planned to go. The scariest realization wasn't that I made mistakes, it was that I would have made them again, if prison hadn't forced me to stop. Most people never get forced. They keep moving until life breaks them softly or suddenly. That's why this lesson matters, because if you don't learn to slow down voluntarily, life will do it for you, through loss, through illness, through regret. And when that happens, you don't get to choose the timing. I don't know where you are in your life right now, but I know this: if everything feels rushed, if you feel trapped by routines you didn't choose, if you keep telling yourself you'll change after this phase, you're closer to the edge than you think. The third lesson prison taught me is the one that finally broke my old identity completely. And once you hear it, you can't go back to who you were before. There is a moment in prison that doesn't come with noise. No shouting, no violence, no warning. It comes quietly. It's the moment you realize the person you used to be is never coming back. At first, that realization feels like death, because for most of your life, your identity is your safety, your job, your reputation, your role in other people's lives. Prison strips all of that away. No titles, no status, no stories about who you were, just who you are, when nothing is left. I fought that moment for years. I kept replaying old versions of myself in my head. The confident one, the respected one, the man who thought he knew where life was going. Letting go of him felt like losing the last proof that my life had meaning. But here's the truth prison teaches you slowly and painfully. You don't suffer because you lose things. You suffer because you cling to what no longer exists. I watched men lose their minds holding onto identities that died decades ago. Former bosses still giving orders nobody followed. Former tough guys still posturing even when their bodies couldn't back it up. Former providers still pretending they were needed. The past becomes a prison inside the prison, and it's tighter than the cell. One man I knew refused to accept where he was. Every day, he talked about who he used to be. Every day, he grew more bitter, because reality never argued back. It just stayed. That's when I understood something brutal. Acceptance is not weakness. It's survival. The moment I stopped fighting the truth of where I was, my mind got quieter, not peaceful, just quieter. And in that quiet, I heard something I had avoided my entire life. My conscience. Outside, it's easy to drown that voice with work, with people, with excuses. Inside, it gets loud. It asked questions I didn't want to answer. Why did you need validation so badly? Why did you ignore the people who warned you? Why did you think consequences were for other people? Those questions didn't accuse. They exposed. And exposure hurts. But it also heals. I realized something that shook me. I wasn't ruined by one big mistake. I was shaped by 1,000 small compromises. Little moments where I chose ego over honesty, comfort over courage, winning over integrity. Each one felt harmless at the time. Together, they built a life that collapsed under pressure. Prison doesn't punish the crime as much as it punishes the pattern. And once you see your pattern, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. That's when I had to make a choice. Either stay loyal to who I used to be, or become someone new, with nothing to prove. That choice terrified me. Because if I let go of my old identity, I couldn't blame it anymore. No more that's just who I am. No more this is how I was raised. No more hiding behind history. Just responsibility. Most people avoid responsibility because they think it's heavy. It is. But regret is heavier. I started rebuilding myself from the ground up. Not in big dramatic ways, in small, boring ones. Telling The truth even when it made me look bad, keeping my word even when nobody was watching, letting silence exist instead of filling it with excuses. That's when I learned another hard lesson. Growth is lonely. When you stop reacting like everyone else, people get uncomfortable. When you stop complaining, people don't know how to talk to you. When you stop feeding drama, you stop being invited to a dot in prison. Growth isolates you dot outside. It does too. Most people bond over shared complaints, shared enemies, shared distractions. When you remove those, you see who was really there. I lost connections, but I gained clarity. I saw how much of my old life was built on noise. And here's the part that matters for you. You don't need prison to face this moment. Life will bring it to you eventually. Maybe through failure, maybe through loss, maybe through a quiet realization at 3 a.m. when nothing feels right anymore. That moment when you ask yourself, is this really who I want to be? Most people answer that question by getting busy again. New goals, new distractions, same. Patterns. Prison didn't let me do that. It forced me to sit with the discomfort long enough for it to change me. I learned that identity isn't something you defend. It's something you choose every day. And choices don't care about your past. They only care about what you do next. One night, years into my sentence, I looked around and understood something deeply unfair and deeply freeing. I had wasted decades, but I still had this moment. And this moment was clean. No history, no future, just choice. That's when peace first showed up. Not happiness. Peace. The kind that comes from alignment. From knowing you're no longer lying to yourself. That peace didn't shorten my sentence, but it gave my time meaning, and meaning changes how time feels. Days stopped being enemies. They became lessons. I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And started asking, what is this teaching me? That question alone separates men who rot from men who grow. Most people wait for life to feel easy before they change. It never does. Change happens when discomfort becomes more familiar than denial. Prison taught me that. And the next lesson, the final one, is the reason I'm telling you all of this now. Because it's the lesson about time itself, and once you truly understand it, there is no going back. There is a moment when time stops feeling like something you have, and starts feeling like something you owe. That moment didn't come to me on my first day in prison, or my 10th year. It came quietly, late one night, when I realized something that shook me to my core. I wasn't afraid of dying in prison anymore. I was afraid of leaving this world without using what I had learned. That fear is different. When you're young, time feels like a resource. You spend it, you waste it, you borrow against it without thinking. When you're older, or when life corners you, time becomes a responsibility. Every day that passed inside those walls was gone forever. Not postponed, not paused, gone. And here's the cruel part. Nothing dramatic happens when time runs out. No warning sound, no announcement. Life just keeps going without you. I watched men receive letters they could barely read because their hands were shaking too much. Letters telling them someone had died, moved on, stopped waiting. Time didn't care that they were sorry now. Regret has an expiration date, and most people discover it too late. I realized then that time doesn't punish you for what you do wrong. It punishes you for what you delay. All the one-day plans, all the conversations you keep putting off, all the changes you promise yourself you'll make after things calm down. Time doesn't argue. It just moves on. That's when I finally understood the last lesson prison gave me. Your life is not built by your intentions. It's built by your daily direction. Good intentions rot when they don't move. I intended to be a better man for years. It didn't matter. What mattered was the day I actually became one. Inside prison, I saw two kinds of men age. The first kind stayed frozen. Same complaints, same stories, same bitterness. Time passed through them like water through a cracked cup. The second kind aged, but deepened. They grew quieter, kinder, more deliberate. They didn't have more freedom. They had more awareness. And awareness is the rarest currency there is. I asked one of those men once how he stayed so grounded. He said, "I stopped trying to get my life back. I started trying to get it right." That sentence changed everything. Most people are trying to reclaim a version of life that no longer exists. Their youth, their missed chances, their old confidence. You can't go back, but you can go forward honestly. That's the part nobody wants to accept. Forward means responsibility, without guarantees. Forward means effort without applause. Forward means choosing differently even when nobody rewards you for it. Prison made that unavoidable. Outside, you can hide. Inside, you can't. And here's what scares me for you. Most people never get forced into clarity. They live just comfortable enough to stay asleep, just distracted enough to avoid the hard questions, until one day they wake up old and realize life already made the final decision for them. I don't want that for you. I don't know your age. I don't know your situation, but I know this: if you're waiting for the perfect time to change, it will never arrive. If you're waiting to feel ready, you never will. Readiness is a myth. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. I learned that too late for many things, but not for all things. When I finally walked out of those gates, I wasn't the man who went in. Not because prison fixed me, but because it removed my excuses. That's all it really did. It took away distractions, took away shortcuts, took away the lie that time was infinite, and in that emptiness, truth appeared. Here's the truth I'm leaving you with. Your life is already teaching you every day, through discomfort, through frustration, through that quiet feeling that something isn't aligned. You can listen now, or you can wait until life makes it louder. Either way, the lesson arrives, but the cost changes. I paid with 40 years. You don't have to, but only if you stop treating time like it belongs to you. It doesn't. It's borrowed. And the bill always comes due. If there's one thing I want you to understand, it's this: you don't need to become someone else. You need to stop betraying who you already know you should be. That voice you keep ignoring. It's not confusion. It's clarity asking for courage. Call the person you've been avoiding. Quit the habit you keep defending. Start the thing you keep postponing. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. Because one day you'll wake up, and now we'll be gone. I'm 65 years old. Prison took 40 years to teach me this. Don't waste yours.